A quiet 2 a.m. decision that changed everything. Just after 2 a.m., while most of America was asleep, a decision quietly moved from discussion into execution. There was no primetime press conference, no breaking banner on television, and no early warning to the public. Instead, confirmation surfaced through internal Treasury notifications, the kind that signal something important has already been approved and is now moving forward. This was the moment the so-called 1776 dividend officially crossed the line from speculation to policy. Earlier headlines focused heavily on military payments and tariff revenue, but what happened behind the scenes matters far more to millions of older Americans living on fixed incomes. According to internal documents released overnight, the structure of this program was revised in a way that directly affects seniors, especially those relying on Social Security, SSI, or SSDI. Timing matters. When news breaks this late, it is rarely about attention, it is about action. And for retirees who budget carefully and feel the pressure of rising prices every single month, that distinction is critical. This confirmation did not require Congress to pass a new bill. It did not depend on future funding. The money already exists, collected through import tariffs. Once Treasury finalized its internal review, the green light was given. That is why this update carries weight. It was not a promise, it was a trigger. For seniors, especially those over 60, this development deserves careful attention. Not panic, not rush, just clear information. Because what changed at 2 a.m. was not just a payment discussion, it was a shift in priority. And that shift may place retirees much closer to the front of the line than anyone expected. What this dividend really is and why it's different. To understand why this update matters so much, especially for retirees, we need to slow down and look at what this program actually is and how it differs from the stimulus checks many seniors remember from the past. At its core, the 1776 dividend is funded by revenue already collected through import tariffs. These are taxes paid on goods coming into the United States. The key difference is this: the money does not come from a new spending bill, and it does not require Congress to pass new legislation. Treasury already has the funds in hand. That structural detail changes everything. When a program does not rely on new laws, it moves faster. There are fewer political delays, fewer procedural hurdles, and far less uncertainty once approval is given. That is why the late-night confirmation carried so much weight. Once Treasury completed its internal review, the program shifted immediately from discussion to execution. For seniors, this distinction is especially important. Programs that move through existing systems tend to be simpler and more predictable. Many retirees already have their income, benefit status, and payment information on file with federal agencies. That makes verification easier and reduces the chance of delays. This is also why the confirmation did not come with fanfare. From Treasury's perspective, the decision was already made. Public attention was not required for implementation to begin. What initially appeared to be a program focused on workers and middle-income households quietly evolved. Internal revisions revealed that fixed-income households, especially seniors, were being evaluated differently than before. In other words, this was not just about returning tariff revenue. It was about deciding who should feel relief first when prices keep rising and incomes cannot. Why fixed-income seniors suddenly moved to the front? What caused this quiet but dramatic shift behind the scenes comes down to one unavoidable reality: inflation does not affect everyone equally. When prices rise, working households often have at least some room to adjust. They may work more hours, change jobs, or see wages increase over time. Seniors living on fixed incomes do not have those options. When grocery prices rise, when utility bills climb, or when medical costs increase, there is no extra paycheck waiting at the end of the month. That reality finally showed up clearly in the updated economic data Treasury reviewed late last night. Internal reports revealed that older Americans relying primarily on Social Security, SSI or SSDI, have been absorbing rising costs month after month with no real relief. Food, rent, electricity, insurance, and prescriptions are consuming a growing share of already limited income. For many seniors, the pressure has reached a breaking point, quietly, without headlines. This is where the program changed. Treasury officials did not just acknowledge the problem, they adjusted the structure. Fixed income was reclassified as a financial vulnerability, not a neutral detail. Purchasing power and income stability became central factors in how households were evaluated. Once that shift happened, seniors moved quickly up the priority list, not because they earn more, but because their income does not change when costs rise. That single factor reshaped how eligibility was scored. This was not symbolic, it was structural, and it explains why seniors, who were barely mentioned in early public discussions, suddenly became a focal point in internal reviews. For retirees who often feel relief arrives too late, this moment deserves attention, because for once the system adjusted before the damage became impossible to ignore. How low-income seniors became a new priority category. One of the most important changes revealed in the overnight review never appeared in public headlines. But for retirees, it may have the greatest impact of all. Low-income seniors were quietly moved into a brand new priority category. This was not a symbolic gesture, and it was not a footnote. Treasury officials revised the eligibility framework so that seniors living on limited or fixed incomes would be reviewed earlier in the process. For the first time since this program was discussed publicly, retirees were no longer loosely grouped with the general population. They were evaluated separately. What changed was not the size of the payment. It was the order in which households are reviewed and approved. Treasury analysts were instructed to rescore eligibility based on purchasing power and income stability. Seniors scored high under this model because their income does not increase when prices rise. That single adjustment moved many retirees much closer to the front of the line. Officials familiar with the restructuring say this shift happened quickly once the data made the imbalance clear. Seniors were no longer treated as an afterthought. They were treated as a financially vulnerable group with specific limitations that required faster attention. Priority status matters because it affects timing. It influences how quickly eligibility is reviewed, how much additional verification is required, and how soon approvals can move forward once distribution begins. For many seniors, this new position represents a meaningful change. Instead of waiting behind millions of other households, retirees living on fixed incomes are now being evaluated earlier, quietly but decisively. And while no payments have been issued yet, where you stand now determines what happens next. Why this shift happened almost overnight. Many seniors are asking the same question right now. Why did this change happen so suddenly, and why was there no public warning? The answer lies in a series of updated economic reports that reached the White House just days before the 2 a.m. confirmation. According to officials familiar with the review, these reports showed a sharp and accelerating rise in financial strain among older Americans. Seniors receiving lower monthly Social Security benefits were found to be under significantly more pressure than previously estimated. In particular, households living on roughly $1,300 per month or less were cutting back on essentials faster than any other group. Rent, food, utilities, and medical costs were consuming a growing share of income, leaving little room for error. Unlike working households, seniors could not offset these increases by earning more. That imbalance became impossible to ignore. One senior economic advisor involved in the review summarized the issue in very plain terms. If tariff revenue is being returned to the public, the people with the least ability to absorb higher prices should not be last in line. That principle became the turning point. Treasury officials were instructed to reassess how eligibility was prioritized, not to expand the program, but to redirect it toward households facing the most immediate financial exposure. Seniors quickly rose to the top of that list. This was not driven by politics or public pressure. It was driven by numbers that reflected real households falling behind in real time. Once that reality was clear, the review was fast-tracked. That is why the decision arrived late at night and without ceremony. By the time the confirmation surfaced publicly, the internal work was already complete, and the shift was already in motion. Why this program can move faster than past stimulus. To fully understand what may happen next, it helps to see why this tariff dividend program is structurally different from the stimulus checks many seniors remember from previous years. Traditional stimulus payments require Congress to pass legislation, approve funding, and authorize distribution. That process can take months and is often delayed by political debate. Even after approval, additional rules and timelines can slow everything down. This program works differently. The funds behind the 1776 dividend already exist. They come from revenue collected through import tariffs. Because the money is already in Treasury accounts, officials do not need to wait for a new law or new appropriations before moving forward. Once Treasury finalized how that revenue would be returned and confirmed eligibility categories, it gained the authority to act. That is why the 2 a.m. confirmation was so significant. It was not an announcement of intent. It was authorization to proceed. For seniors, this matters because speed reduces stress. The program relies heavily on existing federal records, particularly from the Social Security Administration and the IRS. Most retirees already have their income, benefit status, identity, and payment information on file. That allows Treasury to verify eligibility without requiring new paperwork from seniors. This structure also explains how officials were able to adjust priorities so quickly. They were not building a system from scratch. They were recalibrating how an existing system measures risk and need. Fixed income, purchasing power, and income stability were elevated as key factors. Seniors scored high across all three because their income does not adjust when prices rise. This flexibility allowed retirees to be repositioned almost immediately once the data supported it, and that is why this program is now moving from planning into action with far less delay than many expected. The new tier system and why it matters for seniors. After the late-night approval, the most significant change did not involve the dollar amount of the payment. It involved how Treasury rebuilt the system that determines who gets reviewed first. Officials quietly reorganized the program into a multi-tier framework designed to reflect financial vulnerability more accurately. And this is where many seniors saw their position change almost overnight. Under the original structure, priority leaned toward working households within certain income ranges. But once updated data was reviewed, that assumption no longer held. The revised model placed far greater weight on income stability and purchasing power, not just total earnings. In this new system, the highest priority tier includes households that are most exposed to rising prices and least able to adjust. Seniors who rely primarily or entirely on Social Security, SSI, or SSDI fall squarely into that category. Fixed income is now treated as a risk factor. When costs rise, the budget gap appears immediately. Treasury's scoring model recognizes that reality. As a result, many retirees were placed directly into the top tier, where reviews happen first and verification is faster. This matters because tier placement affects timing. It influences how quickly eligibility is confirmed, how many additional checks are required, and how soon payments can move forward once distribution begins. Seniors often meet two critical conditions at the same time. Their income records are stable and already documented, and their financial sensitivity to inflation is high. That combination gives retirees a strong position as the system shifts into execution. This does not mean others are excluded. It means the order has changed, and for many seniors, it changed in their favor. The income benchmarks that now matter most. With the new tier system in place, many seniors naturally want to know where they personally fall. While Treasury has not released a public checklist, internal guidance reveals several income benchmarks that are now shaping early reviews. Households earning under roughly $30,000 per year are generally viewed as stronger candidates for earlier evaluation. But income alone no longer tells the full story. What matters just as much is how that income is received. For seniors, this works in your favor. If your primary income comes from Social Security, SSI, SSDI, or survivor benefits, your household is automatically flagged as having limited income flexibility. That designation alone can elevate your priority status, even if your annual income appears modestly above certain thresholds. Another key factor involves monthly Social Security benefit levels. Internal reviews showed that seniors receiving between roughly $1,000 and $1,300 per month were experiencing the most immediate financial strain from inflation. Within that range, those receiving under about $1,100 per month were identified as facing the highest pressure. And these figures were not chosen at random. They reflect points where essential expenses begin to outpace income with almost no margin left. Seniors in these ranges were moved into faster review lanes within the top tier. It is also important to clarify what does not count against you. Not having employment income does not hurt your case. Not filing recent tax returns does not automatically push you back in line. In many cases, seniors relying solely on federal benefits are easier to verify because their income sources are stable and well documented. In simple terms, the system now recognizes that living on a fixed check is not a weakness. It is a vulnerability that deserves priority. Do seniors need to apply, or is it automatic? One of the biggest concerns seniors are expressing right now is whether they need to do anything to receive the $1,776 payment. This is an important question, and the answer is reassuring for most retirees. For the majority of seniors, no application is required. Under updated Treasury guidance, eligibility reviews are being handled automatically using information that already exists within federal systems. This includes records from the Social Security Administration and the IRS. If your income comes primarily from Social Security, SSI, or SSDI, your benefit history, identity, and payment details are already on file. That allows Treasury to verify eligibility without asking you to complete new forms or submit paperwork. This approach was intentionally designed to reduce stress and confusion for retirees. In many cases, the process will be completely hands-off. You may not receive a notice asking you to apply. You may not need to log in or fill out anything. Your review can happen quietly in the background. However, there are a few situations where action may be required. If you have recently moved, changed banks, or updated your direct deposit information, Treasury may need confirmation that your records are current. In those cases, you could see a message through your IRS online account or your My Social Security portal. It is also important to address a common worry among seniors who do not normally file tax returns. Not filing does not disqualify you. In fact, seniors who rely entirely on federal benefits are often easier to verify than households with multiple income sources. The goal here is simplicity. Officials want this relief to reach seniors without unnecessary obstacles and without forcing retirees to navigate complicated processes. Timing expectations and what seniors may see. First, after eligibility comes the next natural question. When might seniors actually see movement, and what should you realistically expect? Treasury has not released exact payment dates, but the internal process provides important clues about how timing may unfold, especially for seniors now placed in higher priority tiers. Because low-income seniors were moved closer to the front of the review sequence, their cases are being evaluated earlier. Treasury is processing approvals based on verification readiness, not public attention. That means seniors whose records are already confirmed through Social Security and IRS systems may see progress sooner than other groups. It is important to understand that approval and payment are not the same step. First, eligibility is confirmed, then payment information is finalized. Only after those steps are complete does money move. Some seniors may see account updates or confirmation notices before any funds are deposited or checks are mailed. This can feel confusing, but it is normal for large federal distributions. The system works in stages. What has changed is where seniors now fall in that sequence. Instead of waiting behind millions of other households, many retirees are positioned much closer to the front. Early internal projections suggest that seniors in the highest priority tier could see confirmation weeks earlier than households placed in lower tiers. This does not mean others will not be paid. It reflects the new order based on financial vulnerability and ease of verification. The best approach right now is patience paired with awareness. Check official accounts periodically. Watch for legitimate notices. And remember, quiet movement often happens behind the scenes before visible results appear. Will the $1,776 payment affect Social Security or SSI? As this update spreads, one concern comes up again and again among retirees, and it deserves a calm, clear answer. Will receiving the $1,776 tariff dividend affect your Social Security SSI or SSDI benefits? According to Treasury officials and guidance shared with the Social Security Administration, the answer is no. This payment is not classified as earned income or unearned income. It is treated as a rebate funded through tariff revenue. Because of that classification, it does not factor into the formulas used to calculate Social Security, SSI, or SSDI benefits. In simple terms, this money stands on its own. It does not reduce your monthly check, it does not trigger a review of your benefits, and it does not interfere with cost of living adjustments now or in the future. For seniors who depend on every dollar of their regular benefits, this distinction is extremely important. For SSI recipients in particular, where income rules are strict, Treasury clarified that this payment does not count as income for eligibility purposes. It is not treated like wages or ongoing support. There is, however, one practical detail worth noting. While the payment itself does not affect benefits, Holding a large balance in your account for an extended period can matter for certain asset-based programs. For that reason, officials recommend using the funds for essential needs rather than leaving them untouched indefinitely. Eligibility reviews happen before approval, not after. Once a payment is issued, it does not reopen your benefit file or trigger additional scrutiny. This program was designed to ease pressure, not create new worries for seniors who already face enough uncertainty. What seniors should do now and how to avoid scams. As the program moves closer to distribution, many seniors wonder what steps, if any, they should take right now. The good news is that for most retirees, there is very little required. The most important thing is to make sure your information is accurate and up to date. If you are able, take a few minutes to review your records with the Social Security Administration and the IRS. Pay special attention to your mailing address and direct deposit information. Even small errors can cause delays when payments are processed at scale. If you have access to a My Social Security account or an IRS online account, check them periodically over the coming weeks. If you receive a notice asking you to confirm information, respond promptly. These requests are part of final verification, and ignoring them can slow the process. It is equally important to know what you do not need to do. You do not need to apply in most cases. You do not need to contact Treasury or Social Security to ask about eligibility, and you do not need to provide personal information over the phone or by email. That brings us to a critical warning. Whenever large payments are discussed publicly, scams increase. Treasury and Social Security will never call, text, or email asking for personal information related to this payment. Any message that does so should be treated as a scam and ignored. Official communication will come only through secure federal portals or mailed notices. Staying cautious protects not only your money, but your peace of mind. Right now, awareness is more important than action. Being informed and alert is the best way to ensure this process works smoothly. What comes next? As the program enters its final stage. As this program moves closer to full execution, the focus inside Treasury is beginning to shift. Eligibility changes are largely complete. Priority categories have been set. What comes next is not debate, but process. Officials have indicated that future updates will likely center on payment windows, processing milestones, and internal confirmation stages rather than new policy changes. In other words, the framework is now locked. What remains is sequencing. For seniors who have been moved into the highest priority tier, this is an important position to be in as the program enters its final stages. Their records are often easier to verify. Their financial vulnerability has already been recognized, and their cases are now reviewed earlier in the system. That does not mean payments will appear overnight. Large federal distributions move carefully by design. Each stage, confirmation, validation, release, must be completed in order. Quiet progress often happens before any public timeline is shared. This is why patience matters right now. Seniors may hear very little publicly while meaningful movement continues behind the scenes. Silence does not mean delay, it often means processing. For many retirees, this moment represents something more than a single payment. It signals a shift in how fixed-income households are viewed when economic pressure builds. Instead of being addressed last, seniors were factored in earlier, and that change happened before a crisis forced action. As we approach the final phase of this series, there is one more piece that deserves reflection. What this update represents for seniors beyond the dollars involved. Why this moment matters more than the payment itself. As we close this discussion, it is important to step back and look at what this update truly represents for older Americans. Over the years, many seniors have done everything right. They worked, saved when they could, lived within their means, and planned carefully for retirement. Yet rising prices have steadily eroded purchasing power, often faster than benefits could adjust. For too long, that pressure built quietly in the background. This update does not solve every challenge seniors face, but it does mark something meaningful. For once, fixed-income households were not addressed as an afterthought. They were recognized early, evaluated carefully, and moved forward in priority before a crisis forced attention. That shift happened quietly, through data and structure, not headlines or promises. The $1,776 payment matters, but the acknowledgement behind it may matter even more. It shows that policymakers are beginning to understand a simple truth. When income cannot change, rising costs hit harder and faster. Seniors do not have flexibility, And when relief comes too late, it loses much of its value. This program reflects a different approach, one that measures vulnerability not by earnings alone, but by stability and purchasing power. That perspective places retirees where they belong in moments of economic strain. As you move forward, remember this: staying informed is your strongest position. You do not need to rush. You do not need to worry about losing benefits. And you do not need to respond to anyone asking for personal information. What you need is clarity and patience. This process is now in motion. And for many seniors, it is finally moving in the right direction.